ESPN college football analyst, insider, and national champion Trevor Matich for another Matich Monday. Trevor, I just want you to take your analyst hat off for a moment and tell me, what are you feeling right now purely as a BYU fan?
Well, as a BYU fan, I'm frustrated that they're 1-3. I'm frustrated that they haven't been able to turn the corner and win close games, except they won the opener by 2 points, but then they lose by 1 point, by 3, and by 3. And I appreciate that they're fighting as hard as they are. But as a fan, I'm frustrated that they haven't been able to turn the corner and make that one play that's needed to be made to turn a game around.
Okay, you can put your analyst ball cap back on. Put it on backwards while you're at it. BYU was down 17 against UCLA, made it a 3-point game. BYU was down 16 against West Virginia, made it a 3-point game, and then West Virginia was begging BYU to win by giving the ball back inside the 5-yard line there. Is there any value to this idea that, hey, 4 Power 5 teams in the first 4 weeks was just really tough?
Well, there is value to that. But the thing is, if they can mount that kind of a comeback, then why in the world aren't they doing that for 4 quarters instead of 1 or 2? And so from an analyst standpoint, we know they can do stuff. We just don't see them doing it consistently enough over the course of 4 quarters of a game. And so that's one of the things that they need to put together. That's one of the reasons that they lose close games. And also it comes down to making the plays. When you're playing at an efficient level for 4 quarters, you'll make a few more key plays over the course of a game. And really, when you look at this, BYU, 2 of their 3 losses come by the margin of a pick 6. Utah, they lost by 1 point, and they threw a pick 6, 7 points for the Utes. West Virginia, they lose by 3 points, and they give up a pick 6, 7 points for the Mountaineers. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that play was the only play that mattered, because when things like that happen, it changes the way other things happen going forward in the game. There are other plays that you can point to, but usually a football game will come down to just a handful of plays that you can point to afterwards and say, yep, that was key, yep, that was key. You never know which plays those are going to be. And BYU, especially on offense now, is only getting about a quarter and a half to 2 quarters of efficient offensive play where they have really the potential to make those kinds of key plays.
The pick sixes,
or avoid the big one giving it up.
Yeah, the pick 6s are clearly brutal. But as a whole, is this BYU team improving despite not getting wins over the last 3 weeks?
Yes. Now, you asked me to put on my analyst hat with the bill backwards. I'd prefer it kind of to the side a little bit backwards, just so I could look a little cooler. That's the way it's done now. But yes, absolutely. The fact that they've played this schedule, it's one of the most brutal first 4 games of anybody in all of college football. And BYU has been right there in all these games with the potential, if 1 play or 2 plays had gone the other direction, to be 4-0 right now. Now, they also could be 0-4, right? But the fact that they're playing so tough with a new defensive scheme, with a brand-new offensive scheme that's not just different terminology, but it's a different way to be. It's a different physical body that's required to make this offense work at the highest level. And the fact that they've been so close in all 4 of these games is fantastic. And, guys, if you really want to take a look at something that shows you where BYU is now from a character standpoint, remember last year they had 3 very difficult games to start the season, and they played their hearts out. Game number 4, you remember where that was?
At Michigan.
At Michigan, what happened?
They got blown out.
31-0.
Right, and it was not because they quit. It was because they were just spent. They just had left it on the field for all 3 of those games preceding that Michigan game. And then they have to fly out to Ann Arbor, which is kind of a long ways. Well, here they've got 3 heart-wrenching games to start the season, Arizona, Utah, and UCLA. And now they fly all the way to the East Coast. But instead of being spent, they almost win this game. And so I think that shows a lot to the character of this team, and how the fact that I think this is a better team than it was last year. The record I don't think will show it, but I think with my analyst hat on, as I watch the way they play, the things they're doing, and the things that they will do better as they get more accustomed to what they're being asked to do. This is a BYU program that I believe is on the rise, and I don't think people should look at one game or one stretch this year and make a judgment as to how this thing is going, because they are on the rise.
You did mention to us before the season as well that you thought BYU would be better, but don't look at the record. So that's you're repeating that, which I think is a great point. And the point that BYU actually brought it in Game 4, crossed the 50-yard line multiple times, unlike last year. And now BYU has this situation, Trevor. When BYU runs the spread and they run it with tempo, they're pretty good on offense. And that's been the case against Arizona at the end of the game, against Utah when they needed a touchdown, against UCLA when they were behind to try and get back in it. And then against West Virginia in that fourth quarter down 16, they get enough points to make that a game. What do you think BYU should do this week with this offense? Because I think Ty Detmer has a situation on his hand where he goes, do I stick to the pro style and the long-term plan, or do we take advantage of what we do well through one-third of the season?
Well, they need to stick with what they're doing, but there are tweaks within this system that would allow the quarterback to get out on the perimeter more. There are ways that he can run the ball more. And, by the way, they understand how to do the zone read. I mean, it wouldn't take anything at all just to throw a couple of zone reads in there. They've been doing it for years, and so with these people. So that wouldn't be too hard either. But I wouldn't be too quick to think that they need to get away from the pro-style system just because this system has everything that they need. And truthfully, when you watch the tape, you see the plays there to be made. They're just not being made, especially in the passing game. And that is an incomplete pass. That's zero gain. It puts you behind the chains, and then other things happen that make it more difficult to run the ball. And so I think that what they should do, I wouldn't worry about going up tempo. They can if they want, that's fine. What they need to do is just get better at taking what the defense gives them and build in more of the plays that already exist within this system to get Taysom out so he can run around, because he's doing better as a passer in this system, but he's still not a very efficient passer in this system. Most of the balls that he completes seem to be ones where either the route is designed where it'll be open and that's the only guy he's looking at, or he'll see a guy, confirm with his eyes that the guy is, yes, indeed open, and then throw the ball, and that's too late for this thing to work the way it really should work. So you see Taysom getting better week in and week out, but he's still not there as a passer. So I think it would be a good idea just to turn him loose a little bit as a runner within the scheme.
Trevor Matich of ESPN with us on BYU Sports Nation for another Matich Monday. The Cougars will host Toledo, a 3-0 team, on Friday night. Now that you've seen BYU play 4 games and Toledo on the way, Michigan State after that, Mississippi State in Provo, BYU at Boise State in the latter part of October, the next 4 are also tough. Not as tough as the first 4, but still will present some significant challenges. Trevor, where have your win-loss expectations moved or changed now for BYU after 4 games?
They haven't really changed. I mean, you would think this first 4, 2-2 would have been phenomenal. 3-1 would have been a minor miracle, as in we need to open up the scriptures and add another book. If they'd have gone 3-1 against these first 4 with new systems on both sides of the ball. 1-3, we don't like it as fans, right? But the way they're playing is phenomenal. You've got to just give them so much credit. My win-loss expectation hasn't really changed. I mean, if they get to 6 and go to a bowl, I think that'll be a good season. If they get to 7, I think that'll be really, really good. I mean, really, really good. And again, they will be a better team. But remember this, though, that people think that because of the brand names that they've played in the first 4 games, then here comes Toledo. Okay, good. We can take a breath here, right? Well, according to ESPN's Football Power Index, FBI, BYU has a 65% chance of beating Toledo. So that's good, right? Careful, because Toledo is scoring points in bunches, like you mentioned. Their defense has been a rock against the run, against the teams that they faced so far, which have not been great, but they held Fresno State to about 5 feet per carry, not 5 yards, 5 feet. So I wouldn't be looking ahead to Michigan State on October 8th past Toledo, because if you lose a Toledo game, the whole feeling of this season changes from being hopeful to being 1-4 and having lost the game that they need in order to possibly make a bowl.
Trevor, last year BYU had a tremendous group of receivers, senior laden, big, tall guys that made catches in the air. Mitch Matthews at 6'6", Taron Houck at 6'5", and of course Nick Kurtz is back at 6'6". I looked at the last 2 interceptions against West Virginia, and I saw great effort from those individuals and Mitchell Juergens and Aleva Hifo trying to make those plays. But then I thought, how tall are those guys? Those guys are 5'10". Last year, I think Tanner Mangum took advantage of these 6'6", 6'5" kind of guys in a lot of situations. Is that a coincidence, or am I way off base here?
No, you're not off base at all. Those big guys have a bigger catch radius, and you don't have to be as accurate. For one thing, when they're open, you don't have to be as accurate for them to be able to reach out and catch it. But more importantly, when there's a defender close by, they've got that big body that they can use to box out, and they've got that big body and long arms that they can use to reach out. And that's important. I think when you've got shorter receivers, you've got to be more precise as a quarterback, and that just adds to the tasks that Taysom needs to improve out week in and week out, because the receivers are less experienced for the most part, and you don't have that many tall guys. I mean, you talk about having one or two tall guys, that's nice. But last year they had like 4 or 5 guys that would go 6'3" and up. And so that's really, really helpful. So that's a good point. Not an excuse that they would hang their hat on, but I think it's a good point. And by the way, we talked last week about how the receivers, I thought, were just too soft. Soft is the way I'd say it. They weren't fighting for footballs. They would run around and the ball came their way, and if it got to them, okay. But if it didn't because it was contested, well, they might make a little effort to go get it. But, okay, there's a defender there. It didn't come. That, I thought, was just not acceptable. In this game against West Virginia, I saw those receivers fight for balls. I saw Nick Kurtz extend that body and take risks with his body and fight through defenders to catch balls. I saw Mitch Juergens at the goal line and other places fight for extra yards, fight for footballs. And I'll tell you, going forward, that's one of the keys for fans to watch for, because this receiving core needs to really step up to help this passing game work better. It's not just on the quarterback.
Talking with ESPN's Trevor Matich for another Matich Monday. Trevor, which 1-3 team and fan base are the closest to hitting the panic button? BYU, USC, or Notre Dame?
Oh, boy. I think Notre Dame would be the closest, because Notre Dame had expectations of being a playoff team this year. And as the game wore on Saturday, I was in Los Angeles doing 7 hours of radio from a set outside the Rose Bowl for the Stanford UCLA game. We're watching that Notre Dame game against Duke, and I was thinking, okay, now we know how good Notre Dame is, because the score was tied at the time. They're about as good as Duke. Then when the score ticked into Duke's favor and Duke won that game, then I said on the radio, now we really know how good Notre Dame is, almost as good as Duke. And boy, did Notre Dame fans light me up on Twitter and message boards for that. But what do you say? Now, they've had injuries on defense, especially. They've had suspensions and dismissals. But their defense has been so porous that they fired their defensive coordinator. USC's got big problems, but they're also in the first year of a new head coach. And so, you can make some excuses there if you're inclined to do such a thing. Notre Dame's got no excuses, even though they've had the dismissals and the suspensions on defense. They have enough athletes to beat Duke at home.
Better game, Louisville-Clemson or Wisconsin-Michigan?
Oh, man. More exciting will be Louisville-Clemson, because you've got two of the best quarterbacks in the country. And Lamar Jackson of Louisville, if you have not seen him play yet, this is appointment viewing. This guy doesn't just beat opponents. He humiliates them. I mean, Louisville broke Florida State's will when they hung 63 points on him, broke their will a couple of weeks ago. And part of it was because these future NFL defenders for Florida State were trying to light him up when he would run the ball. They thought they had him lined up for big hits, and he would make them miss, and make them miss badly over and over and over again. And then when he didn't make a miss, he just ran over him. Well, you'll see this guy against Clemson now, against Deshaun Watson of the Tigers, who will also be a first-round draft choice in the NFL. So that's a great game. The Michigan-Wisconsin game is just as important. I mean, Wisconsin coming out of the blue, for goodness sake. They're making themselves a playoff contender now. But that game will be more old-school, pro-style, grinded-out, hard-nosed defensive football. And if you like that sort of thing, you like soccer too, which I do. I like both. But, I think for a video game excitement, boy, you better put down Lamar Jackson in that Louisville game.
Trevor Matich of ESPN, rocking his hat backward and a little bit to the side and not sleeping on Toledo. Thanks for the time, Trevor. Great stuff.
All right, thanks, guys.